insult. I want to talk about cooling efficiency at first. In Sweden, we don't have two words for efficiency and effectiveness. I don't know how much that actually changed how Sweden looks at this problem, but it might. It's called effektivitet in Sweden. It's the same word for efficiency and effectiveness. So efficiency is, we've been focused, if you want to talk about efficiency, we have talked a lot about surface area water. Like we've talked about droplet sizes and we want to distribute it and everything. And this theory is sound, of course. More surface area means more rapid heat absorption. Sound, great. We have talked about a lot about by droplet speed, hang time, and travel distance. The longer you can have contact between the water and the smoke, the more you can absorb energy. So you want the droplet to be in the smoke as long as possible. And you want it to travel as fast as possible while still staying there. It would be best if it could just go around. Because you want speed, because speed absorbs energy faster. It's like, it just does. And we talked about limited surface cooling during this time, because we don't want to waste a lot of water just because water damages. We don't want to produce a lot of steam, and we don't think that surface cooling on the way to the fire, not talk about actually suppressing the fire, on the way to the fire, that's not really that important. It might even be a problem that we're creating steam and so on. So we've very limited talk about surface cooling as a part of smoke cooling. And then we, of course, I don't know if we can put some lights. It's hard to see the videos, but we've had the short pulse. Maybe we can shut down the ones in the front. I don't know. That doesn't matter. We have a short pulse. That's sort of the main efficiency of what we talk about. We do a short pulse. We small fine droplets, put them up. Don't let it hit the surface. But of course, if you're inside a toilet, that's maybe enough. Like you sort of cover the space. But if you're in anything bigger than a toilet, you have a problem. You're not actively cooling the entire space. Now we've known that, but we simply didn't know that also because we were doing a lot of short pulses into big volumes for a long time. And you could potentially do that if you have a lot of speed. If you run in, you could probably do short pulses, like I showed a couple of years ago, Anders Bagan Larén. You could put a small pulse in front of the other one and sort of cover the space fast. But we shouldn't run. That's just not good. And we also have a problem with time. If you do a short pulse, you need to distribute the time problem. Again, while you run. If you do a short pulse, again, it just goes away because we are working in a flow. Generally, when we're progressing towards the fire, we are in a flow. If we close the door, it's less of a flow, but it's still a flow. So we have a time problem. And this is part of what the study finds, that we have a time problem. If we cool further ahead of us, we reduce the time component. If we flow all the time, which you don't have to do if you do straight stream, you could just cool straight stream and then advance also. That's fully possible. It wasn't just part of this study. Look at the UL studies for flow and move and instead. But you cool further ahead of you, which also means that you get more cooling usually behind you. We try to incorporate that time issue. So you have this cooling effectiveness. When we talk about being effective, actually achieving smoke cooling, not talking about efficiency, meaning how it's just done efficiently, we focus instead on things like liter versus watts, like how much flow. You need a certain amount of flow. The more flow you have, generically, the faster you cool. It's not always true. And it's, of course, a portion of it that is efficiency, but it's a very strong indicator in a lot of research that the more flow used, the faster you cool. And of course, there's also a minimum, like if you don't have enough cooling capacity at all, you will fail. Which many European firefighters have experienced because we pull the booster line on a big fire and you go like that. This does not work. Yeah, there's a limitation to how efficient you can be. So we focus a lot on liter versus watt, and we focus on massive surface cooling, like just overflow, American style. That's being, if you want to be effective, you just want to massively pound everything. If you could, you want to fill the building up with water, and so it pours out of the ceiling. That's the most effective way of achieving cooling, if you could. If you could just dump the fire truck through the roof hatch, right? And we focus on droplet distribution in space. You want to cover all the space at the same time. You don't want to have a little bit of here, a little bit of here. You want to have real coverage of wherever those droplets are. And you want to have droplet distribution in time. You want to have the droplets there all the time. You just don't want it a little bit here and a little bit later. You want it all the time. And we have these two paradigms. We have, if we want to generically say, we have the American way, which is massively cool as much as possible. Take the biggest hose line that you can manage, train so that you can be more effective with that hose line, and drown the place. And we have the traditional Swedish way of we want to be efficient, we want to use as little water as possible because we want to preserve water damage, we want to have small fire trucks, we want to be fast and so on, and we want to be efficient. But there's something missing here, and I think in the latest years, we've been trying to address that, but we haven't done a very good job. I think we're going towards it. So if we want to have more effective distribution of droplets in space, of course, that's where the long pulse came in. We want to cover the space more efficiently, so we do a long pulse. Or Americans would used to do a long straight stream. We want to cover the space more. Fine. So we sort of retired the short pulse, unless you're in a bathroom. Retire the short pulse, because we want to be more effective. But of course, we got to the point where we had this discussion, of course, steam expansion and smoke contraction. Because if you talk to Americans, the Europeans are steaming the shit out of themselves because you're using fog, and that is worthless because everything goes everywhere and it's steam everywhere. And if you talk to European firefighters, the Americans are steaming the shit out of their firefighters because they're using a lot of water on surfaces, and that's just horrible. So everybody's steaming everyone, but nobody seems to get steam burns anywhere. So it's a very, very, very strange conversation. But anyway, steam expansion, of course, is real. This is great for suppression. Awesome. Maybe not so great with firefighters if we do have steam. Like most people have been steam burned. We're going to get to if that's a real problem in real buildings, but most people have experienced it when you go into the fire compartment in a metal box and you go like, this is not comfortable. I don't want to be here anymore. So most people have experienced that. And of course, it's possibly horrible for rescues. Like that's in a fire suit. If you don't have a fire suit, it's not a good idea. If you're in a nice sauna, and if you put some water on the sauna, it's not so nice anymore, unless you're Finnish. Then like there's some different things in the system. But unless you're Finnish, it's not very comfortable. And if you're in a wet sauna, which is like 100% humidity, you would die at those temperatures in a dry sauna. And we know this. This is not rocket science. This is just you could just go into a sauna and try it yourself. Like a lot of steam sucks. And then we have smoke contraction, which is, of course, great for everyone. So if we can achieve smoke contraction, that is great, regardless of what method we're using. That just proves that we're cooling. Like, that's awesome. Everything gets up in the air, whether it's steam, toxic gases, great. So we have this steam expansion question, and the question, of course, is it really a problem? And in that sense, is it something we need to handle, and how do we handle it? On the other side, it doesn't seem to be a real big problem because we have so many different techniques and thoughts about firefighting all over the world, but firefighters are not generally being chased out of the buildings because of steam burns. So there's two pieces of my brain going like, this is a problem, but this is not really a problem. I don't know which brain to listen to. It's just complicated. When we sit in a fire compartment, as a firefighter, we sit there and you do something with your nozzle and all of a sudden things come down. And you just go like, it's hard to know why that happened. Like, why is it that sometimes it just smoke comes down and everything? Well, like, was it steam expansion? Was it the fire gas ignition? Was it like expansion from the fire? Was it some mechanical force with the water? It's just hard to know. So if you're inclined to say that it was steam expansion, you go like, that was steam expansion. Look, that's bad. If you don't think it's steam expansion, maybe you make something other things up. A fog will push smoke in front of the droplets. This is not something that's really new, but we sort of haven't accounted for it. Like in front of the stream, everything will get pushed. Like there's an overpressure in front of that stream. And it's just physics. If you throw something in the air, especially a lot of it, there's air being pushed in front of it. If you look at old drawings of smoke cooling, it's also that the smoke, the water always just magically slide into the smoke and the smoke just stayed there. Like no, that's not at all how it works. Like that's not how it works. But a straight stream also pushes. If you put a straight stream in front of that smoke, it would also push everything behind. Like in front of that fog that's created in the ceiling, it will act the same way. Like it's just physics. If you create droplets in the air here, it will push everything also in front of it. Now when the smoke hits the back wall, of course, when it's pushed to the back wall, it will push down because it can't push any further or even push out. Like that's just mechanical force. It's just overpressure in front of that stream. It can't go into the wall, so it has to go down and outwards, and it goes everywhere. So if we look at this video again, it's a bit hard with the lights, but you can see the thermal imager here with the nozzle operator. We'll see they open the door. They put the stream up here. It's a sort of a narrow fog, and you see everything just being pushed down. You can see, like visually, the flows just gets pushed down. It's just a mechanical force. You're pushing the smoke in front of you, and it gets pushed into the wall, and it pushes down. Now, before we had thermal imagers, it was kind of hard to know that. You could say that that's violent steam expansion pushing down, but why would it expand just down and not towards the firefighter in that case, or back to the stream? You can see it with a straight stream. You're sitting here cooling in the ceiling. You will see it push down here. You will see it push down here. It pushes everything down because it hits the back wall and it pushes down. It's just mechanical force. You can see it here, but it's harder because now we're in a more realistic scenario. We have a smoke layer here igniting. We can see a little bit of the window here. As straight stream hits the ceiling, it pushes everything down. You can see it a little bit in thermal imager. But in this situation where we mostly are, we have zero idea what's happening. You go like, it feels good. It feels good. Now it doesn't feel so good anymore. I don't know why. I don't know why. Should I use more water because it's the water that's the problem, or is the water the solution? I don't know. And that's like that's not a good place to be. I'm getting steam burns. Should I use more water or less? Well, there's two thoughts in my head go like, use more, condense that steam, or use less because I don't want more steam burns. Like both of those could be true. Or yes, absolutely open the door. At suppression, open the door. But what if I'm in a position where I'm cooling gases that don't have any impact on the fire yet? I'm just sitting there. I don't have any idea. Maybe I don't want to open the door. But we have this. We don't really know what's going on. But we do know that things are happening, and we need to understand that. So a fog will pull smoke from behind and on the side of the droplet. So if I put a fog here, and I put a fog, it will pull everything down. So it pushes in front of it and it pulls around. I mean, that's the hydraulic ventilation. We're using the stream as a ventilation tool. And that's extremely useful. In this case, the firefighter would step inside the room, the smoke layer would ignite, you use a fog, and it pulls everything into the stream because it was a fog. It just pulls everything back into the fog. What's very effective was fire here, fire here, fire here, but I used the fog and it pulls everything down. I'm not saying that was intentional. They had zero idea what they was doing, but it looks cool. I'm just saying that it's not bad to entrain air or entrain fire into it. That's a really good way of sort of getting the smoke back into the stream. But it is an effect that we need to account for. Now instead, if I'm in the bottom here, if I'm in the bottom of a staircase, it's a bit hard to see up here with the light, but that's the top floor. You can see the top floor in the thermal imager. You can see here on the second floor, that's the visual on the second floor, you can't see anything. But if you go up with a fog here and you pulse, now you're taking fresh air from the staircase here and pushing it towards the fire compartment. And if you're not continuously flowing, it will come back. And maybe in that case it will mix with oxygen and it comes back and you get ignitions. And most firefighters, instructors have experienced this in a container. There's no fire, I do a pulse and suddenly there's fire. Because we're mixing and we're taking oxygen in and we're mixing. And if we were close to the flammable limit, maybe that was giving over the threshold. I'm not saying that that's a problem, you just use a little bit more water and then you're done. But we are taking whatever is behind us or where we are and pushing it forward. Now, if we take another system in that case, we don't take manual firefighting, we take sprinkler, it's the same thing. If we have here a sprinkler system inside a small room, we will see on here that the sprinkler in that case comes from above, that's the fog, it will entrain air and it would push everything down. So it will push the smoke down at the floor and out. Like the room was pretty good until the sprinkler system went out. Now that's usually not a problem. Like I mentioned here, but in this case, the sprinkler system is activated so early that it doesn't really matter if the smoke is pushed down because there's no heat, it's not a lot of steam, not a lot of toxic gases. Well, it's not the same if we do it with a 600-degree smoke layer and we push everything down. It might not be best for instance, people we rescue. It's much more visible here if we take a big, didn't press the audio. If we take this, we'll see that it pushes the smoke down. It takes the smoke down with it, and it circulates back, and it becomes like a sort of a vortex. I mean, it's an inverted pulse up into the sky. This is just physics. And the power of the entrainment and so on is so powerful that you take hot gases and push them down to the floor. So it goes against what the smoke actually want to do. And it goes down, and it goes out, and it goes back in, and so we have this circulation. Again, when sprinkler systems, I'm not saying you shouldn't have sprinkler systems. That's not the point I'm trying to make. You should have sprinkler systems. They're awesome, unless you want to do firefighting. Then you don't want a sprinkler system. So it depends on the goal. But anyway, so the physics of it is that you will entrain things up here and pull it down, or you will entrain things down here and pull it up. It's just physics. A straight stream pulls air from behind and side of the droplets. It's just that the straight stream creates the droplets up here instead. Instead of here, it goes up into the stream. So wherever the straight stream breaks up into droplets, that's where you have the entrainment. So if you have a straight stream up in the ceiling, you wouldn't have the negative pressure down here, you would have the negative pressure down here, and then it would act basically like a sprinkler. It could. So if we take the same scenario with a fire on the second floor, we're going to suppress it with a straight stream up the attic, you're going to see that when the straight stream hits straight up, the smoke will come down because it will pull the smoke with it, all the droplets falling down. So we put straight stream up and the smoke layer instantly drops to the second floor. So the straight stream is not immune to moving air. Not at all. It's just that it moves it in a different position, from a different place. And here we see it together. You will see the two effects. You will see a straight stream hit this lintel here, and you will see the pulling effect up, because that's where the negative pressure is. In front of the stream, the overpressure will hit the backside, come back here, and go that way. So you will see it pulls up here. Now air goes here, and now it hits coming back. And you start to have that rotation. And as an instructor, it's great to play with smoke machines and see how the streams hitting different places affect air movement. It might be important. So we have those two paradigms where we focused a lot on these two things. And I think that, of course, truth is like always, it's in the middle. Like efficiency matters. Like you need to be efficient to be effective. But you also need to be effective. Like if you're not effective, you can go home. Like I was very efficient at burning the building down. It's not a good way to end the sentence. Like that's not good to go to the paper. Like we were very efficient. Every water was evaporated, everybody died. Like that's not a good outcome. So efficiency is sort of secondhand, and we'll get to that. So we need to merge that, but there's something missing. And that's, of course, fluid dynamics. Like fluid is most often missing, and it's becoming less. So what's fluid dynamics? It's the science of movement of liquids and gases. It sounds awfully like flow path and air tracks. We just put a new word on it because we're the fire service. We like to think that we invented this ourselves. Like, no. Most of the world understood this a long time ago. We have a lot of scientists who are experts in fluid dynamics. They don't just know that we need it also, like more of it, a lot. But it's not very common or easily visible in scientific data or mentioned in conclusions. Like if you look at studies on manual firefighting, this is not something you read about. You don't read about air movements. You don't read about entrainment. You don't need about that. That's just the latest years that UL started to mention it and so on. So we shouldn't be like very self-critical because this hasn't been part of the literature. But it's still, I mean, we've taught hydraulic ventilation for a long time. And that's the thing I have struggled with in my mind. Like, how can I know something exists over here, but don't apply it over here? Like there's a bridge, a wall between my left brain and my right brain. Like I do know that the hydraulic ventilation moves a lot of air, but inside the building, it magically doesn't. Like, no, well, it does too. Where's the air going? I don't know, but it might be important. And it's not easily visible in scientific data. Even if you know to look for it, those things happen very quick. And usually, like even if you do thermocouple data, you saturate them for a couple seconds, so you don't see those very fast spikes because they're very annoying. Like they mess up my curve. But like those things were being pushed around and so on, they happen very fast. It can be very hard to see those flows without modern good thermal imagers. It's just the latest, I would say 5 years, like with the latest thermal images, that you really start to see those flows. So before that, as a firefighter, we didn't see that. Usually you saw nothing. But even if you saw a flow, you didn't see where it come from. You just saw the end result, maybe smoke being pushed down. How it's very hard to connect the dots if you don't know what's going on. And fluid dynamics is like, if fire science is hard, fluid dynamics is like even harder. And fire, of course, modeling fire is basically fluid dynamics. But we've just been like one compartment, okay, that's sort of figured out, sort of. Multiple compartments, a lot of variables, a lot of rooms for mistakes. Like put manual firefighting in there, it breaks down fully. We can't do that, it's like impossible. You can't hardly put a sprinkler inside there and not mess everything up. The only thing you can make it if you have something real to compare it with. So okay, is the model still right? Is this no, it doesn't. Okay, I just tweak the model. But to make predictions without having the real data, the real fire to compare it with, like very hard. So this fluid dynamics is like super complicated. I just understand 95% of it. No, it's just very complicated. So the result is like even these two, they might look sort of different. Like if you do a stream straight up in the air with a straight stream or a fog, they sort of look the same, but they're really not. They're very much not. The fog, you will have something like this. You will have a lot of entrainment coming from here. You will have entrainment coming here, and you will have the overpressure pushing out. So you would have some kind of rotation. While with the straight stream, you will only have this rotation up here. Now, of course, there's other variables, but these are, even if you do it like 2 meters up, they will produce a change. If you do it in a Hollywood container, if you do a straight stream straight up, you'll see this. It doesn't come down, at least not extent, and you see that it pushes out in all directions, and it sort of works. It's a way better protection against flashovers than the falling on your back and doing a wide fog that the Germans did. Not all. And if you take the same one, of course, if you're outside a compartment, like I talked about before, then it's also a massive difference. It's not the same at all. Both produce droplets inside the compartment, both will stir, but they're very not the same. With a fog, you will, of course, like I shown before, you would put a fog in here, you will overpressure space, and it will come back out. It's about entrainment, it's about overpressurization. With a straight stream, you don't, because you're not putting new air in, so you're not overpressurizing, and the negative portion is up in the ceiling. There's a huge difference to where that fog is created. So with a fog, it looks something like this. You're entraining new air that will overpressurize and has to come out. You still get a lot of, like, it will push everything around in there. Whatever is up on top will go down. The same is for a straight stream, but in that case, we at least won't pressurize the compartment. It will still push everything around. Like, even the most dedicated smoothbore operator in America will say, yeah, when you put the stream on, every visibility you had was gone to zero. Like, if you had something, all streams will move things around, but it's not the same. In small volumes, they might work the same. If you're inside the volume, let's say you're inside a hallway, let's say you're inside a small room, they basically work the same. You will get a rotation, your straight stream get a rotation. They basically work the same. Now, then we have flow differences and there's speed differences, otherwise that, but just as a static, you put a stream in. They would sort of work the same. They both would work. If you have an outlet, let's say it's just an opening here, both will work the same. Both will just push whatever is in front of them round. You will just hydraulically vent everything in front of you, which is the American way of doing firefighting, or at least a part of America. Like, just push everything forward, like push everything in front of you, which works if you have an outlet and sort of like a hallway type, which you can push everything through. It doesn't work if you have an open-spaced room, everything just pushed around. But if you have a long hallway, maybe you can push everything in forward to you. And you would do that with a fog too. But if you have an open space, if you put a fog in, things will move over here. Like it will push things over here. And we will push things somewhere else if we don't have an outlet. Maybe it's into another room. Maybe it's back to ourselves if it's an U shape like this, which is the same for a straight stream. If you put it in a ceiling here, you will move air over here. Because in front of the stream, there will be an overpressure, and the overpressure pushes everything here, and you start to rotate everything. And I've been in that exact situation. I remember it was fairly early in my career, it was a fire on the second floor. I went up the stairs as a number 2. Number 1 was coming up, and it was dark, it was hot, and he was seeing fire here. So there was coming basically a U-turn, because the wall separating the 2 rooms, so one room here, was burnt away. So he did a fog that way, and it get hot, and he did a fog that way, and it was so hot we've just tumbled down the stairs, just and then up again, and then down again, and we were just, of course, pushing everything around. It was just all the heat that we created over here was just pushed around like that. That would be the same with the straight stream, unless we put the straight stream through the window, actually suppress the fire that was inside the room. So it matters if I put the stream in front of the room or into the room. Huge difference in terms of what the experience would be in that situation of me as a firefighter. So if we have cooling efficiency, cooling effectiveness sort of dialed down, I'm not saying we have, we have to find sort of the middle ground here. What's an acceptable loss of buildings when we instead of drowning everything? What's an acceptable loss of how much things can cost? Like, how big can a fire truck be to hold water? How expensive could a hydrant system be to produce a lot of flows and so on? We are, whether we like it or not, have to be efficient to some level or not. And of course, being efficient means that you can be effective. But we have to really find a way to include air movements, like a difference. And air movements are important. Like we do with ventilation, of course, fans, awesome. We do air movements with fire, awesome. But we also need to do air movements with streams in different ways, because it will affect whatever we're doing as firefighters. So what is the objective? Of course, we want to rescue people. We want to keep firefighters safe. The order of that depends on who you ask. Some say firefighters' lives are worth less, some say the civilians' lives are worth less, and some say they were equal. I'm just saying that both of those are probably important, because the firefighters are people too. But it's an ongoing debate, which is a lot of culture. And of course that afterwards we need to save property and environment. Not a strange thing. Why I'm saying this is because if we're to choose between efficiency and effectiveness, we have to choose effectiveness. Because efficiency is about, a lot of times about saving money for the public or making sure the building is not drowned. Okay, so if we need to do something, at least we should like put the fire out. So we want to be effective at doing rescues. We want to be effective at doing cooling. And the second one, we have to understand air movements. Like that's crucial. Air movements by fire, air movements by fans, air movements by streams. We have to understand that, because otherwise we can't be safe. We can't be effective. Because we will, and I know, talking to so many firefighters from, I burn a lot of houses. That's why it's amazing. I don't burn other people's houses who don't want it burned. I'm allowed to burn their houses, just to be clear. I burn a lot of houses for training, for acquired structures. We have a lot of derelict buildings in Sweden. It's a big country. A lot of houses are zero use. So we do training, and when we go through this thing, we'll talk about where do you put your stream, what happens if you put it here, what happens if you put it here, put it happening. Every firefighter almost guaranteed will say, I've been to this situation, I've been to this situation. I just didn't know that this was a problem. And I have the same experience every time I look. I go like, yeah, I've been here. I've been in that hallway to the fog, and I do continuous flow. And after a while, I'm being chased out in the staircase because I was overpressurizing the fire compartment in front of me. I've been to that fire. Most people have. They just don't know it. It was just a bad fire. It was just unbearably hot, or some inexplicable reason to why it didn't work. It wasn't enough flow. Well, probably something to do with how we use our nozzle in some way. And then, of course, we want cooling efficiency. We want to have efficiency because we want to be effective. We will, of course, want to be efficiency because we are the people who pay our salaries want to have value for money, and so on. We can't spend enough, because at some point they will say, no, fuck it, you're not going to get a new fire truck, let's put an ambulance in there instead. Because it's not justifiable. So if we want to be, to be effective, we have to be efficient to get more resources, or at least do more with the resources we have. But I think this is a paradigm shift that Sweden has to really take, have discussions about. Because if efficiency has been that important, to the point I would argue that we're losing, at least putting firefighters at risk, and potentially putting lives at risk because we're not being successful when we're trying to be very efficient, we have a problem. So we have to switch this around. I'm not saying we should go to the point where we become American, because America has forgotten about efficiency. That word doesn't exist in their vocabulary, because water is cheap and so on, but it's not. The hydrogen system is expensive. The big fire truck is expensive. It's hard to move a big hose line. Like, there's many drawbacks of trying to do, for instance, higher flow to compensate for poor efficiency, because you're aiming wrong, or maybe not switching to a fog when you should switch to a fog. But there's two questions in that. The first one is, would it be most effective to, for instance, use a straight stream when I'm going into that bedroom, for instance? Yes, because I don't want to pressurize it. I want to push, I want to keep it in front of me. When I get into the bedroom, actually nozzle inside the doorway, would I switch to a fog? Yes. Okay, second part of that question is, do you think that's functional with 7 weeks of training on a part-time firefighter in Sweden? Like, no. Like, they don't even know that they're in the bedroom at some point. Like, because you're going like this. And you're like, it seems to have everything out, I don't know. Let's stop, put up thermal imager, where am I? That's the reality. I'm not, of course I'm doing it with a, no, I'm not even exaggerating. That is what it looks like. This is for the training. You can see they have a very strict, like, this is how you should do. You know exactly where you are. Good instructors. Even then you have sort of a narrow fog here going the right direction. Here you have a wide fog going into the side wall. I'm not surprised at all about that. Like, when I was going to do, this is me. So I'm sort of not above average in skill level in firefighters. I sort of know what I'm trying to do. I've seen the environment in acquired structure burn. So I want to do a video that shows how this should be done. Okay, so we were doing a acquired structure burn, and sort of middle of training, I was taking the nozzle. I was going to do one fire tack. It was going to be, basically, it was a kitchen area, entrance here. I was going to go basically maybe 5 meters, make a left turn, through the kitchen into a second room here. So probably 10 meters I was going to advance with a left-hand turn. So I had a thermal imager. I was sitting there waiting for the fire to start to roll. Put the thermal imager down, started going to whip. And after a while, I started getting to find a wall. I go like, okay, that's the left wall. I'm going to turn left. Okay, so now actually inside a closet on the right side of the wall. So I'm trying to find my way. I go like this, and there's a wall here, and there's a wall here. I go like, this does not make sense. And I go out, and I try a new bearing, and I try again, and I end up like this. That's the way, and I go like this, and I start drifting again. I end up like in cupboards. So I feel the wall here, I feel the wall here, but something open here. I don't know where I am because I'm going through different type of cupboards. So anyway, the only good thing about this is when I walked around like this, I knocked down all the cameras. So there's no there's no proof that this ever happened, and I will kill anyone who knows about it. No, but it was part of one of just many lessons that said it's hard. Like it's hard. It's hard to move with a straight stream, just get in the right direction. It's hard to, even if you flow, take your bearing, go forward 2 meters, and then still flow again, and that will have new complicated, because now we have a time problem. If you wait too long, you're back at zero again. Like you have a time problem, which is why how we work between 1 and 2 is very important. And it changes if you switch to straight stream, for instance. Like how 1 and 2 works together is like massively different. But it's the same with fog. Like you see, it's complicated regardless of whatever you do. But I just find the second part of the question, straight stream has less problems with usage than fog has. And my experience is getting to that apartment and then switching and having firefighters in zero visibility, knowing that you're actually inside the compartment, switching to fog, finding the right pattern. While you have found the right pattern, you have long before just and done. It is not flow continuously, because most fires are not that bad. Like most fires are pretty reasonable. Fires are pretty small. So you, for instance, if I were to teach the most basic and simple one, and if they have a thermal imager, it would be if you have a FLIR camera and you look into the hallway and you see gray, you don't cool, but then you advance 2 meters and you check again. Like, because if you only see gray, it's not very hot. It doesn't really make a much of a difference. Right, okay, so if you see yellow, then you do an arc, and then you advance 2 meters and you look again. And you see yellow again, you do another arc and you advance. And if you see red, then you can start maybe, if you see red in the camera, because it indicates like 500-600 degrees, actual flame and combustion, then you maybe can start to think about, should I try it and cool? Yeah, but to me, it's one of the valuable things I learned was, first I had a sort of, when I tried to, I wouldn't say dumb it down, I say simplify, because that's what we need to do to firefighters. We need to simplify. When I try to simplify and say that, okay, as soon as you stop seeing yellow, in that case, you can advance. The problem is, of course, time. If you cool and you take up a tick, it's yellow again. Because you have a time problem. It will rebound, it will come back. So in that case, you will just sit in one place to cool, put it down, cool, put it down. So what I teach is, if you see yellow, for instance, or if you think that it's sort of half hot, you cool with an arc, then you advance 2 meters. If when you cooled, because that's the cooperation 1 and 2, and when I teach, number 2 is always sitting holding camera for number 1. So number 1 can see what's happening. So you cool, and if you see any, like it becomes gray, now you know that you're stronger than whatever fire it is, and you can advance 2 meters until you do it again. Like, you need to see that sudden improvement. That's 1 second long. That's all you need. Now I know I'm stronger than the fire. If you're cooling and you don't see any improvement, it's still yellow. Now something is wrong and you shouldn't advance. So it's not it's what I describe it as temporary improvement to know that you can safely advance. Like, we don't have like massive ventilated structures. It's one window gone at most. Those are on bedroom on fire. Then stop and flow and advance would be far more than we need. It's just a simpler with a straight stream rather than a fog.